Hey everyone, my name is Rick Gualtieri and welcome to another Tales of a Midlist author. First off, I wanted to apologize for having no new video last week. I had a major launch going on. I probably should have announced that ahead of time, but there was just so many moving parts. I just did not have time to put together something and have it be coherent. By the way, if uh, if you're curious, it is Strange Days, Bill of the Dead, Book One, available now in ebook and coming very soon to audio. So, shameless plug out of the way. This week, I wanted to talk about finding the right editor and/or cover artist. This came in as a request. I know in the past I've talked about working with cover editors and artists and being a good client. Um, and that still stands. But this is more okay. Well, how do I find the right person? And that can be tricky. I would say it's one of those things that takes time. Um, I know. Sometimes I think probably the worst stories I hear out there about with regards to this are the people who like find somebody who's really awesome to work for and it works great the first time and then they go back to them for another book and they pretty much wind up getting ghosted, lousy service, and it's kind of like, well, all right, that's an issue. Because some people will give their all to a new client, but then when you're on board, then it's like suddenly you kind of drop down the priority list, and you know you want somebody who is going to be there for you over the course of, I won't say your entire career because things change, but you want that consistency of finding that team that you're like, this is my team right now, and hopefully for the foreseeable future. I personally work with Megan Harris. She's my primary editor, and I know she kind of kicks my stories asses in shape. Um, and I work with Mallory Rock of Rock Solid Book Design for my covers. And at this point, we've all worked together for several books. We have I would say a good working relationship. Um, Kind of like have an understanding of what each other is looking for. Is it exclusive? No, because the bottom line is sometimes the constraints of this business require otherwise. Sometimes I'm working on a project with another author, and maybe they want to use their editor. Sometimes maybe just a book cover that I have in mind just requires a different look and feel. These things happen, but yeah, I would say for the bulk of what I do, that they're my team, and I'm very happy with them. But finding that happiness took a while because I've gone through, I've gone through multiple cover artists, and like for one reason or the other, I've just been like, it probably isn't working. Been ghosted once or twice. Same with editors. You want to find somebody who just kind of works with you and works well, because y ultimately what works best is where that business relationship becomes kind of like that friendly relationship where you kind of like they're your go-to person. You know what to expect from them, they know what to expect from you, and that you have that kind of that synchronicity that just makes your book shine. But how do you get there? um, and getting there, like I said, can take time. So I would say start off any search for an editor or cover artist by figuring out what your budget is, if any. Um, you know, if you decide, well, I'm not going to spend more than $100 on like a cover, and you find a cover artist that you think is perfect, but they charge you $600 for a cover, well, going and asking them if they'd be willing to take like a sixth of the price because just because of you, that might not be the greatest way to start off things. So figure that out ahead of time, before you start looking at things, and that can save you some heartache. If you don't have a budget, I will say there are some editors and or cover artists who out there who are willing to work on kind of like kind of a barter or like trade or maybe like a payment plan. Payment plans are probably more common than barter or trade these days. But if you are looking to trade services, I would say go into there, think real hard about what you have to offer. Most people aren't going to work on IOUs if I owe you a favor or so. If you do have something to trade, make sure that it is something of value. Um, Maybe you have a skill or so. Hey, I I I'm a good woodworker. Maybe I can trade you a new desk for a cover. Some people might be like, okay, sure, let's check that out. Um, just something to think of ahead of time. If you don't have anything to offer, um, that can be an issue. Maybe it's time to like just save your pennies until you are ready to afford this. Um, so start doing you want to do research. So go to places like Kboards and their yellow pages. Look at authors whose works you like admire, whether from from they're just like really clean, or maybe they like maybe you like their covers, and just reach out, ask for recommendations. Most people are happy to pimp out their teams. If they're not, sometimes that's an issue. Right there. If somebody is jealously guarding their people, well, maybe it's not their team's problem, but maybe you're dealing with an asshole author. But ask around. It doesn't hurt to ask. You lose nothing by doing so. Check out websites. I know I've worked with a couple of beginning artists and or editors who maybe they have a page on DeviantArt, or maybe they have something else, or maybe they don't have a web presence at all. And usually my thing is you want to get that web presence, because I know that's the first thing a lot of us want to do before we reach out and talk to you. And make sure you don't just have samples or stuff up there. Make sure you have prices. Make sure you have information about you, your process, all of that stuff up there. And for you as as searching for an editor or cover artist, those are the things I look for. I want to not just see the services I'm paying for, but how I'm paying for it. What is this payment structure? All of that stuff. So, for example, if I'm looking at price, but I want to do see payment structure. How is payment handled? Some authors, for example, refuse to pay up front, and some editors or cover artists basically are like, well, payment is due up front, and some are flexible about that. Some are not. So going in there with your demands of, well, I will only work with you if you do this. Well, the question is if you're especially just starting off, you don't have a whole lot of collateral there, so you're not really coming from a place of power to do that negotiation. Just something to keep in mind. I would say, what do they accept with regards to payment? While I have paid in the past with with either credit card and a couple times check, just for the record, I hate writing out checks. My comfort level is usually PayPal, because why? Especially if I'm paying up front, PayPal offers that protection, so that if something goes wrong and the work is not done, that money is recoverable from my end. That being said, never work with somebody who insists on you paying them via friends and family payments as opposed to a business transaction. That is not legit. That is not the way to do it, and it does not offer you protections. Even if they are a friend, they should be willing to understand that yes, this is a business transaction. It should be paid like a business transaction. So a little CYA notice there. If you're working with anybody and they're like, oh no, pay me via friends and family so we don't have to worry about fees and stuff, you're kind of, one, you're going against PayPal's rules and regulations or terms and conditions, and two, you're potentially screwing yourself. So I would run, not walk, if somebody was telling me to work that way. Figure out what your timetable is. Again, know this stuff ahead of time, because if you're like, hey, I need an edit back tomorrow, and they're like, oh, okay, I'm booked out 6 months, you really have no recourse there to complain. Now make your timetable known if you do have one. I mean, if a lot of times I'll go in there relatively early in the process and I'll be like, okay, I know this book's not coming out for 3 months, so let me just get on a schedule to get a cover done, which usually is not a big deal. But if you are working with a timetable, make sure they can fit that timetable. If you don't communicate it in advance, that's on you. If you communicate in advance and they aren't able to make it, that's on them. These are things to take into account. Oh, and above all else, be a good client and pay your bills on time. It's one thing to be screwed, to basically say, okay, I paid for one thing and I got something else, but if you do that thing where you just renege because at the end you're like, well, it's I changed my mind, after the work is already done, that's really not cool. So I would say it's one of those things to only bring up in extreme cases. And I mean, where you've done your due diligence, if you go in there assuming, well, I'm assuming I'm getting a developmental edit, but I'm paying $100 and I just got back a proofread, well, that's kind of on you. If you do your homework ahead of time and you what you're asking for, what you're looking for, and it's still, and it comes back completely different, that's a different story. But just reneging on something because you don't want to like pay for it or so, that's not cool. So let's jump over to editors first. With regards to like finding the right editor, a lot of editors will offer a sample edit. Maybe it's 1,000 words, maybe it's a full chapter, whatnot. But I know a lot of editors will offer like a sample edit, so you get an idea of, if I send you my stuff, what am I going to get back? Now, don't be the asshole who says, well, hey, well, I have 20 chapters in my book, so what if I just find 20 different editors and send them all a sample chapter, and then my book is edited for free? Well, first of all, your book's going to be a mess because all editors all work differently. And two, well, like as I said, it kind of makes you an asshole. Don't be that guy. Talk to them up front. Don't just assume. Ask questions. Any question you have is always better to ask up front than after the fact. Know what kind of editor you're paying for. Know how you're going to get it back. For example, with me, I like to send out with my manuscripts out in Word, and I prefer to get them back in Word with track changes not accepted. Now, some editors will send me back 2 versions. Here's all the edits, so you can look through and see, and here's all the edits accepted. I never just accept the edits. I kind of have what I would call an 85-10-5 rule, where with a good editor, like Megan, I find that 85% of their edits, I'm pretty much just going to go through and accept because they're right. Maybe 10% of their edits, maybe they're like, okay, this chapter needs to, or this section is too long. Maybe I'll meet them halfway. Maybe there's things in there I want to keep, but they're valid. There is too much exposition there, so I'll cut it down and I'll kind of meet them halfway. That's at 10%, and maybe 5% are just things I just don't agree with. Maybe it's like, hey, this is poor grammar, change it, but it's dialogue and I like the way it sounds, so maybe I'll just say no, I'm going to keep it the way it is. Maybe about 5% of those. That's just the way I work. I'm comfortable working that way, and I find a good editor kind of falls into that. And I mean, it's no fault that 5% that get rejected. That's just that at that point is really just usually opinion. It's not like I'm saying no, I like that word misspelled. So, and I can't do that if somebody just sends me back, something that's not in track changes, or if they send me back something where all they're like, where, okay, here's your document, but here's a page of notes, and here's all the stuff to like fix, and that is really not going to work for me because I don't want to go through and make those changes manually. That's not what I paid for. But find this stuff out in advance, because if this is the way the editor works and you haven't established that up front, the issue is on you. One thing to consider, especially if you are paying a little bit up front, and I find this is useful this is useful for me because it also helps my process, but sometimes with working with a new editor, see if they'll consider sending back the book in chunks. So, for example, maybe I have a payment structure where I'm saying, okay, well, I'm going to pay you a third now, a third in the middle of the project, and a third at the end, which I usually consider to be more than a fair payment structure. Maybe I'll say, well, hey, send me that third back up front so I can look for it. Because therefore, if I do see issues, we can head them off at the pass, and I don't have a full book that's full of issues. Excuse me. So that's one thing to to see. And I know that works for me because it allows me to to go through maybe a quarter of the book and just move on to other projects and stuff, because it actually winds up helping my process if I don't have to go through the entire book all at once. So those are some things to work for. Communication is key. Here's the thing. You shouldn't need to be babysat. You shouldn't be somebody who sends them an email every 5 minutes saying, how's it going? How's it going? How's it going? Don't be that person. But at the same time, if I have a legitimate question and it's not being answered and I'm being ghosted, I'm not really comfortable with that. That is not really a professional way of doing things. And here's the thing: circumstances arise. If somebody has an emergency and they have to disappear for a couple of days, I'm not going to lose my mind. Especially if they come back and just explain it. But I do know that is a big issue with both editors and cover artists. I've heard where people are like, I send them stuff and I don't hear anything back, and I have questions and they're not answered. And honestly, if I get that non-professional vibe, even if they do a great job, I'm probably not going to want to work with them again. So, editors, ask for that sample chapter if they offer it. If they don't, well, hey, that's fine. They should offer you some kind of like examples of how they do things. But communication is key, and communication is likewise key with cover artists. The difference here is that no, a cover artist will likely not do a sample cover for you. So don't ask. However, a good cover artist will have probably a comprehensive website with tons of samples and pre-mades. I know you go to Mallory's website. There's a ton of both finished covers and also pre-mades there, so you can get a feel of her of her sample of her style. I also used to usually, assuming they have samples up there within the genres I write in or I'm asking for. I like to compare their examples to the bestseller chart and stuff and see, okay, do they really have a handle on this genre? Um, you know, some you look at and you're like, wow, that might be nice, but it looks nothing like what is indicative of of a genre. And I mean, you don't want clones of a genre, but you want to have that feel there. Um, it's hard to quantify, but I know I'm going for a certain look, and I know if that look is there or not within about 5 minutes of looking at somebody's site. So, go through that, get that. One thing I do not like, and some people will go DeviantArt can be a great place to find potential artists and illustrators and stuff. One thing I would keep in mind is that I don't like just looking at art. I want to see typography too, because there are some artists out there who are kick ass at illustration or photo manipulation and all of that. And then when you get to fonts, it's okay, that's just Arial slapped on top of it. Get a sense for the typography. I mean, that's one of the things that I've always liked working with Mallory for, is that she's just kick ass with her fonts and typography. I mean, that's half your cover right there. It's not just the image, it's your author name and and the title of that book, just reaching out and smacking somebody in the face. So, and I find sometimes on DeviantArt, sometimes that can be a little misleading, because somebody will be like, well, here's my artwork, and I'm like, okay, I want to see a full cover, and if I can't see a full cover, it gives me a little reservation. Now in some cases you can have the art done by one person and the typography done by another. There is nothing wrong with that. And if you choose to go down that route, that's fine. I'm just saying this is something I look for. Let's see here. And apologize for any voices in the background. It's a snow day here, so yeah. You want to find out other things on their website, like who owns the copyright, what is the licensing, all of that stuff. It's not necessarily given that you own the copyright of stuff that you're paying for. Sometimes you're just getting an unlimited license, which is fine. Doesn't bother me really. As long as I know what I'm getting for in advance and such. But you want to know these things, because that'll that'll kind of tell you what you can and can't do. So for example, if I have an unlimited license, I can do a lot with it. But if I sublet it to if I sell the series, or or license it out, well, I can't necessarily do a sub license of the cover as well. They might have to work with my cover artist. So these are just things to learn in advance. And I would say probably a big one is, how many major and minor revisions are you allowed? Because that can be an issue. Some cover artists will basically say, and I know some will do the unlimited revisions, and some have drawn the line, because some customers are just crazy, or it's like, okay, show me your first draft. No, that's not good. Completely redo it. No, that's not good. We completely do it. And they wind up in this cycle of just doing nothing stuff where reality the author probably has no idea what they want. Find out in advance, and and here's the thing. You better be able to give a good description of of one, either what you're looking for in a cover, or a good synopsis of the book. Don't expect that they're going to read your book. I've heard a couple of people say, well, I wouldn't work with a cover artist who wouldn't read my book. Guess what? A good cover artist probably doesn't have time to read your book. Your job is to summarize it and give them an idea of what you're looking for. Some offer maybe 3 major revisions and unlimited minor revisions. I would just say, don't be a dick with regards to that. I want to get my cover right, but I also try to keep in mind their time, their time. So I'm not coming back I try not to come back every 5 minutes with no, let's do this. No, let's do this. No, let's do this. I try to rein myself in with regards to that. And I know sometimes, I can get picky, but I do try to keep in mind the amount of time they're putting into it. Versus like, it's kind of like I want the perfect cover, but I don't want to be that jerk who like, who's looking at every hair strand and saying no, this is a little out of place, do this. And again, be mindful of timetables and communication. I think probably the worst horror story I tend to hear with regards to this stuff is, hey, I paid for a cover. I said I needed this time. They said they could do it, and hey, we're a week away. We're a week away, and I haven't heard anything from them, and they're ghosting me and stuff. That is usually not cool. As I said, emergencies happen, and I'm not going to lose my mind over something for an emergency, but some artists will just ghost you. I've been ghosted more than once in the past, and it just sucks. But at the same time, as awesome as an artist as they are, I will not work with them again if they are not professional. And I think that's really what it comes down to with this is professionalism on all parts, and that's really what I look for. I look for the talent. When I'm working with an editor or cover artist, I want the talent to get what I want done, but just as importantly, I want that professionalism. And in return, part of my job as the client is to return that professionalism. Be mindful of their time, pay my bills on time, and be a good client. And hopefully they'll be a good vendor. And if you wind up with that in that nice zen of, hey, we work well together, we're all professionals, we all do good work. That is an awesome place to be in this industry. And hopefully you can keep it up for several book series, however long you can. Until you need to make that switch. All right, I've talked long enough about this. My name is Rick Gualtieri. This is Tales of a Midlist Author, and I will talk to you again real soon. And if there's anything I didn't cover, as always, feel free to ask me in the comments, and I'll be more than happy to answer. Talk to you again soon.